You look at Lexington's crime data from 2022 compared to this year, you might think it was a different city.
It does. I think I feel it. I think the biggest shift, obviously, the numbers being down, but I think you're seeing people that are not competing anymore.
In 2022, the city saw a record-breaking 44 homicides. That number dropped to 24 in 2023. At this time last year, there had been 13 homicides in Lexington. 12 were gun-related. So far this year, 6 of the city's 7 homicides have been shootings.
We don't really use the word celebrate because in our world, people are still being affected and even losing their lives to gun violence. But it is something that I think needs to be acknowledged. Director of One Lexington, Divine Karama, says he hopes the numbers empower others to join them in the fight against gun violence. He takes them as a sign that their efforts are working. So I think it's the comprehensive way that we have taken towards addressing gun violence. It's not one program, one person, one initiative, one type of. It's everybody coming together, all hearts on deck. Historically, Lexington, like many cities across the country, has seen a spike in shootings in the summer months. Last year, that spike occurred in August and September. I think you're going to see more conflicts as kids come back into school. I think that played a part in it. We're fully out of the pandemic now. And so I think strategies just continue to change and adjust. But I think if we just keep doing what we're doing, I'm hopeful that we'll see progress throughout the rest of the year. Divine says city governments show their priorities through funding, and the city of Lexington has continued to invest in One Lexington and their work, making ending gun violence a priority. In Lexington, Samantha Valentino, WQIT.